Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's If I Made live class with Nicole from Soil and STEM. I just want to open up the class with a little bit of information. If it's your first time joining us for a live class, kind of make your way and get familiar with the platform. On the right side of your web screen, you'll see a chat box, and you may already see people communicating there. It's amazing to see where all of you guys are tuning in from, truly all around the world, from Bulgaria to South Florida to San Francisco. So thank you for being here. Type any questions that you have along the way into that same box. And then at the very top of that chat box, you'll see that Rebecca, who's on the back end moderating for us today, has posted a link of suggestions and requirements so that you get the best experience out of today's class. So if you have any connection trouble, we usually just recommend that you close your browser and come right back in. Live classes are special in that way because we're all sharing the same connection here. So the last thing is, if you have to leave early, we totally understand. The creative professional life can be a crazy one. And so you will get an email that will offer you a replay link, and you will be able to watch that for 48 hours if you're just joining us today. If you also purchase Thursday's class, you will actually have lifetime replay access to both today's class and Thursday's class. And last little bit here, if you are joining us today and you haven't signed up for Thursday's class yet, and if right now or at any point during mine and Nicole's conversation, you're kicking yourself and you wish you would have, you still have the chance. So we have actually left that class on sale, so you'll be able to get it for $50 off still, and be able to come back and join us to watch Nicole do a demonstration, which should be good stuff. So enough of all of that, a lot of intro there. But Nicole, I just first want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be chatting with you guys today.
Same. It's so fun to be able to get as close to an in-person experience with you as we can. Obviously, right now we have around 250 people joining in, and if you had one-on-ones with 250 people, it would be a totally different ballpark. So yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I'd like to start today's class just by asking you, how you got into the art of floral design, as much as you want to share about that, how you got into the business, and then kind of bring us up to speed with where you are today, with your passions or what life is looking like. Just kind of give us a little intro.
Okay, yeah. So I sort of fell into floral design. It wasn't something that I ever thought I was going to grow up to do. I thought I was going to grow up to be a painter or a photographer or something. I knew I always wanted to do something in the creative field, and actually went to school for graphic design. And I've always loved the outside and nature, but I had never really designed with flowers before. I remember gathering flowers when I was little and, popping them in a vase and going to the grocery store and getting grocery store flowers and putting them in a vase, but that was the extent. That saying where flowers kind of arrange themselves, that was me for most of my life. So like I said, I was interested in graphic design, and that's what I went to school for, and ended up out of high school, and as a college job, I ended up working for a large corporation where I worked in human resources, and I got really comfortable with that weekly paycheck and got really settled in, and speed to 8 years later, I'm still working in that field in human resources. And it wasn't until my sister got married that I found floral design and found that art medium. She just came to me one day and was like, "You like this kind of stuff, like plan my wedding for me." And so I did. And that's kind of how I found flowers. I remember we had a really long weekend where I was baking cakes. We did the floral design. We did like the tables and all the decorations, and and it was just real. I remember it was exhausting, but it was at the end of that really, really long weekend. I remember cleaning up and turning to my husband and saying, I want to do this. Like, I think I'm going to do this for a living. It was like a moment of epiphany almost, and it was really satisfying because when I drew or when I painted, and through college, I never quite found the satisfaction in my work that I found when I designed with floral as my medium, or as nature as my medium. And so yeah, that's kind of how I decided I was going to be a florist. And then so it took some time though before I got the guts to quit my full-time job where I had my paycheck every week. And it wasn't until after I had my daughter that I kind of came back to flowers, kind of kept coming back to flowers. And I started by just arranging here, and we're in my garage right now, arranging in my garage and taking pictures of my work and posting them on Instagram. And that's kind of how things grew, I guess, from there. And obviously making connections with photographers and working with some wedding planners and things. But really on a personal level, I feel like I grew the most just by being in this space we are right here, and designing for myself and just putting my work out in the social media world to be judged, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. And as far as where I'm at now, I'm in it over 5 years now, and it's just been really rewarding and really satisfying. And it's taught me to look at kind of the world around us in a different way, searching for different flowers or different shapes the flowers make, or the lines the branches make. And it's fun to explore that with my daughter as well, as we go out on walks or whatever it may be. So yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah,
but,
I love that.
Yeah, that's kind of how it started. Nothing too fancy. I did end up taking, I guess to expound on the question a little bit more too, I did end up, I took some classes when I first kind of decided I was going to be a florist. I did take some classes, and there was this, there's no one at the time offering classes, not like how it is now. Right. And the only class I could find was this old man that was like 2 hours south of like where I lived, and he offered just very like, basic floral design classes where you're taping all day long, or you're doing funeral arrangements, or the spiral methoding, and so it was very like structured sort of floristry. But then I found the first florist I kind of fell in love with as far as her designs was Ariella Shazar, which is one of the first like florists to kind of like pioneer a lot of this natural designs recently. And I remember looking at her website, and I saw like acorns in her arrangement or something. And I was like, there's acorns, you can do that. And just being so like excited. And it really kind of opened my eyes to seeing that you can use those other natural materials in your work, besides just the blooms themselves, which was really exciting for me at the time, I remember. And then I'm lucky enough, I live near some really amazing florists as well. And I remember I took Sarah Winward's very first in-person class that she taught, and it was just life-changing from there too. She's amazing.
That's amazing. I feel like, so many of the florists we get to talk to today have a similar journey. Somebody actually commented, it's interesting the parallel even between graphic designers and florists. I feel like you meet a lot of people that were once graphic designers, and you know, just the era that we've all gotten to witness of people leaving these, you know, 9-to-5 jobs, like you said, with consistent paychecks and health insurance and, you know, all the good things that they offer, but also just kind of getting to experience what it might be like to dive into creative work and just not being able to say no to that. So I love hearing that journey firsthand. And I'm sure a lot of the people watching right now resonate with that same story, whether they've made the jump or not. I feel like a lot of us have felt the pull towards a more creative life. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's definitely been rewarding.
Good. And so let's dive into today's class. We're going to talk through kind of the journey that I think you, and I mean, I've heard this from a few other florists, are on from kind of ordering a ton of different flowers for, specifically today, we're going to talk about large scale arrangements, to kind of honing in on maybe composition and shape by lessening those orders and those varieties. But kind of give us some background on when you started doing large arrangements, and what your approach maybe was in the beginning, and as much as you want to share for what you've learned, you know, to date, kind of give us a little insight on that process.
Yeah, definitely. So I've always loved the idea of creating something large and grand and just kind of just, I guess, those statement pieces. And from when I started doing statement arranging, I think when I first came into it, I felt like, oh, we had to have all of these different types of materials in it in order for it to be large and make a statement, or in order for me to charge so much money, I have to make sure I have like these big full face flowers in it, or whatever it may be. And it wasn't until I started designing actually for myself that I discovered, like, wow, I really love just working with one element and simplifying, because I can really focus on the shape that I'm making with the arrangement as a whole, and really kind of put a magnifying glass on that one material that I'm working with. The moment I had that, though, was unfortunately not that long ago, a few years ago, but it was when I, and those of you who have followed my feed or have seen the promo for the class, it was that Japanese anemone urn that I did, where it was in the fall, and there really wasn't, and it was an arrangement that I just made for myself, and it was, the garden was just full of Japanese anemones, and I just thought, oh, I just want to pick them all. So that's what I did, and then I was able to kind of from there realize the way I placed those pieces into the vessel, changing what direction that they're facing, how tall or how low certain ones are. That's kind of where I guess at that moment, and I think I'll probably reference that a lot during our talk today, but I find that for me anyway, a lot of those aha moments happen when I'm doing something for me, or I'm experimenting with something for me where I don't have a client or someone else's vision in the back of my mind that I'm trying to work to. It's more of me experimenting with the material and kind of discovering different ways to use it.
So good. I think we hear that a lot from different experts, and a question that comes up pretty often, which we didn't talk about this beforehand, so we'll wing it a little bit, but I think it's really hard when you first start getting into something like floral design and you're working your 9-to-5. There's so much excitement and passion. You're creating a lot and you're learning a lot, mostly for yourself in those beginning years. And then I think once you switch over into business mode, it's easy to get consumed with doing work for clients, or even doing work that you feel like other planners are needing from you, or you feel like other florists are doing all the time. It's easy to get sucked in. So for you, do you have any tips for kind of safeguarding that personal time, or is there any certain, like once a week or once a month, or do you have any red flags where you're like, oh, it's time for me to do some work for myself? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, definitely. So it definitely is so easy for me, a lot of the times after a large event or something, I don't want to see another flower. Like I'm just going to shove it in the garage or leave it at the studio and not worry about it until I have to clean out buckets for the next event, And yeah, that's definitely an easy thing to fall into, where you just feel a little burnt out and maybe just not inspired because you are working to the client. But for me, one of my favorite things to do is, regardless if how tired I am, I always love to rework the leftovers if I can. And reworking the leftovers is when sometimes I get those really great like portfolio shots, whereas if I'm shooting at a wedding where I have no control over the lighting or the linens or if maybe the photographer uses a weird filter that doesn't show the proper color of the flowers. There's so many different elements that happen when you're setting for a wedding, and it might not be your ideal situation for your flower portfolio. I always try to come in afterwards, maybe it's a day or 2 days after the wedding, and do a mock-up for myself. And yes, it may be slightly different. Or maybe it's something that I wanted to go really, really big with, and I couldn't because the client didn't allow me to. But trying to get as much life out of the product as possible is always something that I try to do. But I definitely know it's not possible. As for every time, Yeah. As far as when you're feeling like maybe it's time to start designing for yourself again, is if you feel like, for me, I mean, it's such an emotional thing. If you're looking through your Instagram feed or you're looking on Pinterest and you're feeling like down on yourself or something, or you're feeling like, hey, like I wish I would have thought of that or whatever it may be. Sometimes those feelings or feelings of insecurity start creeping in. Then I think that's the time that you need to just put down your electronics and go out and, get some flowers in your hands and start playing with shapes and different materials and see if you can't rediscover, your love, or rediscover some inspiration, that you can give yourself. So yeah. I think it's super easy to get like trapped into where you're working so hard, on the weekend, Thursday through Saturday or Thursday through Sunday, and then like you just need your like off time on that Monday through Wednesday. But a lot of the times I find on those off days you're constantly on social media and like comparing yourself and things like that. So if you can just kind of take a break from that and get back into using the materials that you want to use, or even just the materials blooming around where you live, so you don't have to spend extra money, that always helps me like make time for me, I guess.
I love that.
Even just in your garage, or your home or your apartment. I mean, you can just find a little corner nook with some nice window light. I mean, that's what I did when I first started. Like, I'm in my garage, and if you were to see the whole garage, you would see there's bicycles and dirty buckets and, dog beds and whatever it is, and you just find a nice little pocket in your home. You might have chaos going around, but you might have that little piece of serenity where you've got your little setup for when you want to design for yourself. And yeah.
I love that. That's such a good reminder. I think it's easy to think that if I had this remarkable space with a ton of window light, with, a walk-in cooler, that I could start making the work that I want to make. But most people end up starting, in their garage or their kitchen or that one window in their home, that you said brings peace or serenity to their work. We had a few people ask about the Japanese anemone photo, and it's the second one on your Instagram. Is that correct? The one
that is a good question. Let's take a look.
Somebody, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, cool. thank you guys for, Elena is the one that said that, is it? So that's the one, if you guys want to reference it, that's the picture she mentioned. And a lot of people are just saying like, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for being so open. They're feeling very encouraged. So thank you guys for saying that. Cool. So let's go into, we did have somebody ask about pricing, and I know it's not something we'll go like into like, there's a formula for pricing and everybody has different costs and overheads, but maybe specifically for this class, if you want to talk about your approach to pricing for large scale arrangements, and maybe even how that's changed as you've taken a more simplified approach.
Yeah, definitely. With large scale arrangements, a lot of the time, the way I price that is based on my client's budget, right? Because we all kind of work to our client's budget on what we can create, and we always want to do the best that we can in order, like, or the most that we can within that budget, right? So I've definitely had moments where I'm like, I don't care if I'm going to be like breaking even on this. I just want to do this amazing like installation or this amazing urn. And so what I try to do for most clients is, again, create the large scale or pitch a large scale arrangement according to what their budget is. For those that, and this is kind of where I started actually bringing in the simplified arrangements into my client proposals, is when you want to put maybe a big bar arrangement up and your client just doesn't quite have the budget to have like a bunch of dahlias and these really expensive blooms, is think about, what I like to do is think about, the season that we're in and think, okay, is there something that maybe I can get that's either really inexpensive or something that I can source from the property, which will bring a sense of belonging to your piece. So an example might be when I had a wedding a few years back, we were up in the mountains and elderberry was just growing like crazy all over in the mountains. So we were able to go up and cut a bunch of elderberry down and create this big elderberry like spilly piece for their bar arrangement. And I didn't have to charge them as much as I would if I was putting in those expensive blooms like roses or dahlias or whatever it may be. So just by utilizing the materials that you have around you and basically putting a magnifying glass or plucking whatever is in season and beautiful and ready to be used at that time of year, you can really save on what you're either charging the client or what you're going to be using. There is like the industry standard where you want to do your 30% markup. Usually that's kind of the 30% markup off wholesale is the standard, and then you've got also your designing fee on top of that. So for me, when I'm pricing my large scale arrangements and I know it's something that I'm actually not going to be purchasing from a wholesaler, like I'm going to go out and cut something, then at that point I got to think about, how much is that, how much that's going to be on my labor, how much is that going to be on my time. I have to find where the branches might be or where the material is going to be at, and then I have to cut that material, transport that material. So for the most part, I like when I'm charging for that, I'm going to look at how much maybe the wholesaler is charging me for a bunch of, cherry blossom branches. And then I'm going to do my markup on that plus my design fee on that. So that's kind of how I look at it when I'm not purchasing from a wholesaler. I'm just going to basically look at what the wholesaler's charging me and charge the client basically for my time to find these branches or whatever it may be. If that answers your question. The pricing is a bit tricky, but I feel like if you have a client that like you want a bar arrangement at, and you say, oh, okay, I know that there's going to be an orchard that I can cut from, like this wedding's at an orchard, and I bet they'll let me cut some branches from an apple tree or something, then you can work to their budget that way. I guess that was like 2 different answers, but really you just have to make it work for whatever you're like pitching them. And I think it really is important to like stay like to keep in mind what the industry standard is, but I feel like there's no like black and white answer when it comes to pricing. You just have to look at, you know, what's worth your time, you know, what they're really getting. Even though, say, if I were to do a blooming branch arrangement for a client, it might not cost me anything if I'm sourcing the branches from my yard. But it's going to be, you know, I water that tree. I pay for the water for that tree. I have to pay for my tools. You have your designing, you have your urn and things like that. So you have to keep those things in mind when you're doing your pricing for the large scale. But for the most part, what your clients are really looking for when it comes to justifying costs for the large scale arrangement is they're looking for that like wow moment, right? Which is so great with when you multiply something that is in season, in bloom, like at its perfect peak. And if you can magnify that in an urn and have these large swooping branches, you can charge a good amount of money for that, even though it might have not cost you up front, or it might not have cost you at that moment, you know, that $100 or $50 or whatever it may be if you were purchasing branches from a wholesaler.
Awesome. I think that's all such good information. I think it can be difficult to break down pricing in a class, and you guys have so many good questions coming in. We're going to probably swoop around some of these pricing questions because they can become an entire class all on their own. And then also I'm going to include a link you should see in your chat. We have a course through If I Made that's pricing for creatives. We teamed up with a woman named Shanna Skidmore who has done a lot of incredible work with some creative professionals. And again, it's an entire course on pricing because when you get down to it, your area is different. The tools that you're working with are different. Your overhead, even studio to studio, is different. So it's something we've just found that's so important for you to dive into. And it's tempting to say, like, here's the fee that I charge, and here's, the design fee, here's the overhead that I have, but those numbers won't actually serve you if you're not calculating your own costs. So,
right. Yeah, there's no black and white.
Yeah, what you shared is so good. And I told somebody I would stop talking with my hands so much because it was noisy, but I'm still talking with my hands. So you guys let me know. I'm going to try to.
Or if you can hear my chickens in the background, that's probably.
Oh, the chickens are great. It's so good.
Just like cackling like crazy.
Pastoral of you. So we did have a few questions while you were chatting that came through about foraging and about these branches that I think would be a good thing to address in today's class.
Yeah.
Let's see. Somebody asked, do you add anything to your water to help these forage flowers stay fresh or branches stay fresh?
Okay, that's a great question. I find I like just clean water the best. When you process your woody stems, you're going to want to make sure that you cut an X at the end of the stem, and that will help the stems absorb the water better. There's some branches that I prefer to actually like crush, which will help them absorb water better. And those are like lilac. I usually just take a hammer right to the stems, and mock orange is another one that I feel like really needs that crushed stem in order to absorb the water the best. But for these woody stems, I just do that. I just take my clippers and cut an X at the very bottom, and that will help them absorb the water the best. As far as the using floral food or anything like that, I usually use it the most when processing roses. They love floral food, and I use the Chrysol Professional too. But yeah, for these, just plain water for the most part, for most everything that I process.
Awesome. And we have a few like clarifying questions. Do you usually just flatten the end of the stem by crushing it, or
Yeah. So
yeah.
I probably hammer it like a good, like, I don't know, like a 5 times, and to where it gets pretty flat. Um, and just so just so you can see a lot of fiber at the end. Once that fiber, the woody fiber starts separating, that's when I'm like, okay, we're good. We can put you in water now, and you'll be happy.
Awesome. And then let's see. Somebody asked, we have this question quite often. Do you typically ask permission from the grounds that you're foraging, or what is your go-to?
Yeah, so there's definitely like a gray line. You don't want to be cutting down people's trees, and you want to cut your product in a way that's not going to hurt the plant. So definitely, if you're cutting something on someone's property, you want to maybe always have some cash in your pocket, and like knock on the door and be like, hey, like introduce yourself and say, I would love to clip this if it's all possible. I've got, $10 or $5, or, and most of the time they won't even take the money. But if you're like upfront with them, and admire their garden with them, or whatever it may be, and you want to take a stem of something, you definitely should ask if it's on someone else's property. For me anyway, a lot of times I will find trees or plants or bushes in like deserted parking lots, or on the side of the road, where it kind of doesn't really belong to anybody besides us, everyone that pays taxes, I suppose. And a lot of times the city workers will come down and just like hack everything, down without regard of the plant itself. So for the most part, I look at it like we're doing the plant a favor when you cut responsibly. So when I say cut responsibly, you just need to make sure that when you are cutting, you're just not whacking a branch off in the middle of its stem. You have to look for a point in the branch where it's not going to basically leave a dead end. You're going to I'm trying to see if I can find an example for you, but you'd want to cut like where the Y, like if there's a Y from the main trunk and then a branch coming off, you want to cut right up against that main trunk. Or if you're cutting on a smaller branch, you need to make sure that you're cutting at the point that is nestled right up against the main vein, so you don't have just a blunt end where the tree or plant can't have another growing stem off of that main stem.
That's great advice. Thank you for that. And then we had a couple of people ask about refrigeration. Do you, in the summer, refrigerate, differently than you would in other seasons? And then do you use a professional cooler, or are you just using like water?
Yeah. So I do have a cooler. It's not very large though. So I mostly reserve my cooler for my more fragile stems, or stems that are more susceptible to heat. In Utah, we have very like intense seasons. So we have a very beautiful spring, very mild. We have a really hot, dry summer, a really amazing fall, and then a really intense cold winter. So we do have like those true 4 seasons. So for summer, for us, it's essential. I'm always refrigerating our roses. That's something that I'm always trying to make room in the cooler for the garden roses, especially. But other than that, most everything else is just in buckets and water. The important part with keeping your florals fresh is making sure that they're just in a cool, dark space. So if you so for me in the summer, if I'm working out of my garage, I have a studio space, but sometimes that doesn't really lend itself. We have stairs, we have to go up and down. So it doesn't always lend itself to having working events out of there. It's mostly just for classes and working on portfolio things and stuff. So a lot of times I'm working out of my garage. And in the summer, I'll move my flowers down into my basement where it's nice and dark and cool. I feel like that's where I've seen the most success in prolonging the life of my flowers, and just holding the flowers is just making sure all of your lights are off when you're not in there designing, and making sure it's not too hot.
Awesome. Thank you for these tips. People are saying they're very helpful. So this is something we wanted to cover, and Elizabeth asked this question. She said, do you have your top 5 favorite woodies, is what she called them, to forage? So if you want to say like throughout the seasons or just some of your go-tos.
Okay. Yeah. So for like the woody stems, I love crabapple is amazing. The crabapple that we have here is just this gorgeous, gorgeous, vibrant pink color, and the blooms are really, really big. So crabapple is great. I love the ornamental cherry plum trees, and those are the ones that have they kind of have like this mauve-y tone to them, almost burgundy mauve blossoms on them. Dogwood is amazing. I have to order that in because I don't have any really around me. And mock orange is great. I've got a mock orange plant that I always cut from. It's so great. And let's see. Cherry blossoms are great. The problem with me is I think about when I'm cutting down all these blooming branches, I have to think about, but in the summer I can maybe make some fruiting arrangement with them, because most of the things that are blossoming end up having fruit with them in the summertime. So like when these are blossoms from a Maribel plum tree, and I did have a little bit of heartache as I cut those branches, because I was just thinking about the summertime and them going to be plums, and I could do something with the plums. But yeah, so those are some of my favorite ones. Lilac's amazing. The smell is so great. Yeah, I don't know. It changes. I wouldn't say I have any favorites. It's kind of whatever is at its peak usually is what I like to use and multiply.
I love that. Somebody asked, Lauren, who was it? Caitlin asked a really great question. Do you have any preferred branches or foliage for hanging installations? Any that you found work really well?
That's a great question. So I would say most of the time your hanging installations aren't going to be in water. So you're going to want to set yourself up with branches that aren't going to faint too quickly out of water. So some of those might be like smoke bush would do really well not being hydrated for a few hours. Oh goodness, like any evergreen, although I don't feel like I use evergreens very often. Oak is another great one that would do really well without being hydrated. Oh shoot. And even just branches without blooms on them. I've done an installation where I had a big storm in my backyard, and this huge branch fell over, and I was like, I gotta use this. So we used it for an installation, but it had all these blossoms on it, and I chose to take all the blossoms off, even though it was really sad. I just knew for the installation itself, the blossoms wouldn't hold up. And so we basically took all the blossoms off, and then we recreated those blossoms with flowers that actually would hold up out of water. Yeah. So really the key is just choose product that is going to lend itself for being out of water if you're doing a hanging installation. And also another thing to look for too is lines. I think that's something to be aware of. If there's a certain branch that has a nice swooping line or something that the eye can follow throughout the installation, that's going to just create a really nice moment for the viewers. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Good things just to file away in the back of your mind while you're, brainstorming or doing an installation. So you guys are sending in so many great questions. We have a few questions coming in from people about tools and some sourcing questions. And if we can fit those in today's class, we will. But I just wanted to let you guys know that that's a big part of Thursday's class. Is Nicole's going to share some of her tools for large scale arrangements. We had some questions about foam versus wire, and she's going to dive into all of that on Thursday's class. So be sure to circle back around. Again, if you guys weren't with us in the beginning of this class, we're going to extend that sale, so it's still $50 off, so that you guys will get the best chance to join us on Thursday for the demo. But there's a few questions here that I know are along the lines of what we wanted to cover. I want to kind of dive into this before we have to get too close to the end. And that's just gaining inspiration for fresh design. We have a few people that have said that they're newer floral designers, they're new to the industry, and obviously Instagram and the internet in general is in such a different place even than it was 5 years ago. And I think it's very easy for it to feel like an echo chamber where just everybody's doing the same thing, or, you know, you're constantly putting your own work up against all the work that you're seeing, you know, on these social platforms. So what has been your experience with that? And what would be any tips that you have for people starting out in this era?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think, you know, falling into that comparison trap can be really, really tricky, especially for those of you just starting out. I think the most, I guess the best advice I might have for you is just to like focus on you and not what other people are doing. I know that's like hard. That's like sounds so easy, but it's really not, especially with having social media or like your phone on you constantly, and you are fed constantly information, and that whether you subconsciously absorb it or consciously absorb it, it's so easy to feel like maybe down on yourself because, you know, so-and-so's doing this, or maybe a friend got a big break that you wanted to get, or whatever it may be. And I think, I guess the best advice and what worked like for me was just, you know, focusing on me and not really looking at my feed or looking at stories or whatever it may be. And just, you know, going outside and, taking a walk and noticing the, you know, the lines that a tree might make, or the negative space in a certain bush or whatever it may be, and that can help you stay inspired and help you just gain inspiration from what's kind of growing around you. A couple of other things that I like to look at is old flower books. There's one flower book that I brought today that I wanted to share with you. It's called The Flower Art of Japan, and it's by Mary Avril. And even though I'm not, and I know this style is really in right now, but I don't really do like Ikebana style consistently. My style is a little bit more like overflowing and spilly and things like that. But I still take a lot of inspiration from this book, and I think we'll link that for you on here. But it talks a lot about, you know, your lines and creating lines for your viewers to see. And you can apply that even if you're not doing like the Ikebana style of floristry. You can still take a lot of tips from a lot of old flower books that I found really helpful in my design, because really some of the everything's been around for so long, and it just kind of circles back around. And if you can take inspiration from a book, or inspiration from maybe a painting, like for me, I was really drawn to at first, if you look at some of my old stuff in my feed, I was really drawn to like the old Dutch masters paintings, which still like stir something in me that I just love so much. That's like another way to stay inspired, and how I find inspiration. There's an artist that's down in southern Utah who is a painter, and she's like my current inspiration that I'm just like, maybe I want to be a painter. But she is, she's amazing. She, her name is, and I'm gonna like butcher it, but it's Ulrich Arnold, and she paints using like the earth, basically earth painting is what you call it. So she like takes materials from the earth, like minerals and, rocks, sand, plants, and she like muddles them up and does some potion magic. And she creates these paints out of earth tones and out of the materials that she finds around her. And so she's currently in southern Utah, which has some amazing colors down there. But and there's another painter that I just discovered who does that too, with like sands and cacti and stuff. So I'm gonna go to her workshop because I really want to just try it out, just because that's what's inspiring me right now. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with flowers, but it has, everything to do with design and color and all that stuff. So
I love that.
Rambled on, but
no, that's so great. I mean, I think that's the thing, that we typically just get really like tunnel vision into our phones more than anything. And so to realize that it's also, I mean, it's beautiful and kind of freeing to be able to draw inspiration from other art forms as well. The name of the first artist, can you spell the name of the first artist?
Yes, I wrote it down because I was like, I'm not gonna, because you see things in your mind and you're like, that's how it's said, but it's probably not. Anyway, so it's Ulkrike. Oh, excuse me, Ulrike.
Cool. And then Arnold.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other artist, who I'm gonna go to her workshop, her name is Stella Marie. She's doing something in Joshua Tree in a couple months, and where we're gonna make some paint out of sands and cacti. So I'm really excited about that.
I love that. And then you mentioned in the beginning there was a floral designer that kind of led the way into this new era of floral. She was like one of the first designers. What was
so most of you might be familiar with her, but it's Ariella Shazar. She was just one of my, I don't know, when you have that person that's just like your person, like just have that halo around them. She was definitely like the one that really sparked the interest in using these alternate natural materials besides just what you would find at your flower shop. That's Ariella Shazar.
I love that. And then somebody asked for the book name. I just put the link in one more time in that chat so that it's at the top. And then one last little piece I know you mentioned is that there's a podcast called Remind Us of that.
Yes. So there is a podcast that I listen to as well, and it's great for really any online creative, and it's called #Authentic by Sarah Tasker. And her and I started our Instagrams around the same time. So we followed each other. So we've kind of like grown. I mean, she's up here now, but it's really amazing to see. But she started a podcast last year and I've been listening since the beginning. And it is like talking to a friend when you need someone to talk to, especially when being in this world of social media and being a creative and trying to be original and I mean, and she talks business. It's just a really nice podcast to listen to if you're in the creative industry and online too.
Awesome. Thank you for all of those resources.
Oh, sure.
So you guys, we're going to transition fully into Q&A for the last 5 to 10 minutes of today's class. Thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a free class, but it still is so exciting to be able to be a part of your growth, to be able to have face-to-face conversations with, experts that we know you admire, but as close as we can get is face-to-face in our modern age. So I have a few questions that I just want to ask as it pertains to large-scale arrangements, and some people ask some really beautiful creative questions that I'll probably throw in at the end here. So we just practically speaking, somebody asked, do you ever clean your foraged foliage with anything specific? Like, do you have a cleaning solution or what's your go-to?
I don't. I think I definitely want to clean the bottom of my stems, clear of any foliage or blossoms that are going to be in the water itself. And if it's, I guess if it's particularly muddy, I may like hose the bottom of the stems off, but usually not, because when I am holding these flowers for an event, it's usually only, maybe 72 to 48 hours, maybe even 24 hours before the event starts. And so your hold times don't have to extend a week. You're okay if your water's a little muddy for, a day or a day and a half while you hold your branches. But the key is really just, if you want clean stems, really, you don't want either any blooms or any foliage down in the water where it can start growing bacteria and things. But for the most part, I don't really clean the bottom of them.
No, good to know. I feel like those are good tips. And then William asks, how long do the branch arrangements last in water? So if you have a client who's wanting these branches to last 7 days, what would be like the best choices, or what do you typically advise clients?
Yeah, so it probably wouldn't last 7 days. A lot of the times, like flower shops will put together arrangements where you have your buds partially open or even closed all the way, and that's when your stems are going to last a whole week, because they have that week to open up. But for me, when I'm cutting my branches or even designing itself, I'm usually designing at the peak of the flower blossom. So it's only going to last, say, maybe 3 to 4 days max, because I am designing to the material that is already in bloom. But if you're designing and you want something to last a whole week, you may want to consider making sure that your buds aren't open all the way, so that they will eventually open up. So a great example of that is like a magnolia. I've had magnolia sitting in my garage for like 2 weeks before it's even opened, getting that like from the wholesaler. So the warmer the temperature, the quicker that your buds will open up. And then obviously if it's in more light, the quicker they'll open up as well. So if you want to hold something for longer, then keeping it cool and dark, it will stay longer.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then we had somebody ask, do you ever mix branches with permanent botanicals? And what are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean by permanent botanicals?
I'm not sure. William, if you're still in the class, if you want to let us know what you mean by that, we'll revisit that question. I loved this question because I feel like it definitely ties into the topic of inspiration, how to stay inspired, and still take on client work, which keeps you going. But Caroline asked, how do you identify the line between a creative challenge and a client with just too different of style? And she says, more bluntly, do you have any tips on evolving your clients' not so sophisticated idea to a place that you would be proud of the end product? Like, how do you approach this?
Yeah. A lot of it depends on the client, and also if you're working with a planner as well. Luckily, I get to work with some really amazing planners who can, who pair us up really well, so we can, so that our visions align. But definitely, I have had some clients where things are just outdated, and you're like, oh, do I really have to do this? So my advice to you is, and what I've done in the past at least, and it hasn't always worked, but what I've done in the past is when I have a consult with them, I try not to look at any pictures, I don't want their Pinterest feed. I don't want any of that. When I meet with them, I want to get, kind of a feel of who they are and a feel of, the environment that they're going to be married in, or wherever. If this is for a wedding, the environment they're married in, or the environment that the arrangements are going to live for the event. And from there, I will create the proposal that has my idea of what I think something should look like. And then if my client comes back and says, oh, actually, I was thinking more of this, and then like throws in a Pinterest photo of something that you're like, whoa, okay, 1995, like, okay, I guess I can do that. Then, you can maybe work around, finding either middle ground, or that client is paying you, right? So if you feel comfortable doing that piece for what the client has asked you to do, then just do it, and just don't post about it if that's not the kind of work that you want to attract back to you. Only share on your website or on your portfolios or Instagram the type of work that you want attracted back to you. So if you have to do something really that's not up your alley, it's probably beautiful, but it's not something that you want to book in the future, then just don't post about it, and take your paycheck and be happy that you made the client happy.
That is some solid advice. So good. So we heard back from William. He meant synthetic flowers. So do you ever mix branches with, silk or wood or paper flowers?
Yeah, so I do that when it comes to installations. I think that's a great kind of fallback, especially installations where you might have 100-degree weather or 90-degree weather, and you're afraid your flowers aren't going to do so well. Mixing fresh flowers with synthetic flowers is a great kind of backup, just in case you have flowers that just don't want to hold up in the heat, which, I mean, they're all living organisms. As soon as they're cut, they're going to start dying. And if they're not in the right environment, they can fade pretty quickly. So yeah, definitely, it's easy to layer your synthetic or your synthetics behind your fresh flowers. That really kind of gives a sense of there being more fresh flowers than what there might actually be. And again, it's just a nice backup. I don't think I've ever done it in a vase arrangement. Just for me, I don't feel like there's ever a need to, because they are hydrated. But when it comes to doing installations where you might have things out of water or in foam that really don't like the foam, or just in the sun or something, it's a nice backup.
Cool. Thank you so much for that. So guys, we have about 3 minutes left in the class today. I wanted to remind you, for all of you who had questions about tools, to maybe join us for Thursday's class. It's going to be a lot more of an extensive demo where you get to see her go-to tools, and also Nicole will be demoing a large-scale arrangement in real time. And it'll be the same as this class, where you're able to ask any questions along the way that you have, so that you can really get a hands-on learning experience as she demos one-on-one. So last couple of questions. I just loved this idea. When you were starting to kind of bridge the gap, when you were starting in the very beginning of your floral business, did you gain your clients through Instagram? Or how did you start to get clients whose work and vision, or who, I guess, respected or sought out your work and vision?
So when I first started, I paired myself with, or not paired myself, I made friends with a wedding planner who was also starting up. And I had never worked in the wedding industry. So I only knew things from my wedding, things from my sister's wedding. And a lot of that stuff was, for my wedding, I literally picked my wedding out of a book, and it took like an hour. Like, it was, I don't even know like who I was back then. But what I did was I paired myself with a wedding planner, because I wanted to know kind of how weddings worked, and what, kind of what went behind the scenes, without kind of getting too into, I didn't know a lot about like freelancing at the time, and I could actually go work for someone that wasn't like at a flower shop or something. So I paired myself up with a wedding planner, and she's the one that kind of booked my first weddings for me, or with me. And also Instagram was a huge at getting my name out there, and attracting more clients, or even just people that love flowers onto my feed. I would say one of the biggest things that helped me when I was first starting out and not having a lot of work to do was setting goals for myself and writing down those goals. And I know that sounds so basic 101, like goal setting, but I swear to you, it really worked. And it's really amazing to actually go back and look at my old notebooks and look at some of the goals that I set, because they were kind of silly and not, well, silly to me now, but at the time they were like big deals, like, oh, email so-and-so. But it was really hard to put myself out there at first, and of being afraid of rejection and all of that. But I think that when you do set goals for yourself, and also working with people who are like-minded and have the same style as you, can really, really help you in getting more clients and getting more exposure and things like that.
Awesome. And to leave us today, if you just want to give a piece of advice for maybe a florist who is interested in trying their hand at large-scale arrangements, whether they want to like enhance what they've done before, or maybe they're just starting out, where would you say to start?
So I would start by cutting down a tree. No, just kidding. You want to go large. I guess that's like the first thing that I tell my students when we do large scale arrangements is go larger than what you think is appropriate, and be kind of unapologetic about it. For me, you might be, cutting down a really large piece of branch and just feel and take, even if it's just one piece of branch, take that branch like inside into your environment and see how it feels in that environment. Because even just like one blooming stem or two blooming stems can make a huge impact in kind of just the room. It just makes a statement by the scale of it. So yeah, I don't know, that's kind of silly advice, but really I think for large scale arrangements, it's just all about being bigger than life and taking that one element that you see growing out around you and bringing it inside on a large scale. And yeah, it'll make a statement.
No, that's a great tip, a great little piece of homework for us to take home with us. Well, thank you, Nicole, for joining us. Thank you for being so open and honest about your journey and all of these on-the-spot questions. And then thank you, everyone who joined us today. Again, if you are watching this and you're watching the replay link, Thursday's class is going to take place at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. So apply that to your time zone wherever you are. And it'll be the same kind of format where if you're joining us live, you'll get to ask Nicole questions in real time. And we would love to see you there. If you guys create any large-scale arrangements out of the inspiration or homework you have from today's class or Thursday's class, please tag us on Instagram. We would love to see the work you're creating. We believe in you. That's why we do this. We believe in the creative arts, and we know that the floral industry is one that's just constantly changing and evolving. So we want to see your application of today's class. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see those of you who have signed up on Thursday. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.